Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. My name is Mike Peterson, and I'm the founder of Science and Design, which is an educational and marketing platform that helps the interior design industry understand its role in improving the health of our clients. It's pretty exciting. It's really come along in these last several years, and we can note that by having guests today on this webinar from Cyprus, last month from New Zealand, and from now around the world. Before we get started, I'd like to just make a couple of announcements to everybody. I want to announce and remind everybody that we have a pretty significant event coming up on October 24th on Friday, the day before High Point Market. It's called When Design Heals, How Interior Design Shapes Health. And it's pretty exciting. The morning session, it's a full day, and the morning session is devoted to the science of biophilia, neuroaesthetics, and the health benefits of nature. We have special presentations on fractal patterning, on nature's colors, and our keynote is Jennifer Walsh, who is a strategic advisor to the Brain Health Initiative at Harvard University, and she's also faculty advisor to the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics, led by Dr. Anjan Chatterjee. The second half of the day is devoted to what you have been asking of me, and that is how do we market, how do we message this new development in interior design by using and thinking of science as the foundation for interior design. So the afternoon session, we have brand marketing, we have website design, all of which will be attuned to infusing your marketing with science and neuroaesthetics. And the day will end with a panel of three designers who have just graduated from the Science and Design Certification Program. It's pretty exciting to see what has happened to their businesses as a result. Now, if you're planning to attend, excuse me, but haven't registered yet, please do so as a favor to me. We're working on the head count for lunch, and it'll just help us plan a little better. The second announcement I want to make is on November 13th, next month's webinar. We have Erica Sarit and Katie Decker Erickson, brand managers and also business coaches. They'll be talking about infusing science into your business model and how to market and message it. You've really asked me for this help on marketing, and so I'm glad to provide it. Now we'll be off in December, and we'll be back in January. I do hope you're all signing up for the Science and Design community page on LinkedIn. I hope you're getting our monthly newsletter. If you're not, go to scienceanddesign.com and register. Okay. I have a question for you. Are you aware of just how important you are? How important your work is as you create beauty through design? Do we as an industry fully realize just how important the environment that you create is to your client? Today's talk will be centered around how important the immediate environment, what you create, is to the human mind and body. And there is no one more qualified to speak to this subject than our guest today. Let me tell you about Tye Farrow. Working at the intersection of architecture and neuroscience, Tye is a world-recognized pioneer in tackling how our built environments either give or cause health. The first Canadian architect to earn a Master of Neuroscience applied to architecture at the University of Venice. He is a much sought-after speaker, having presented to respected organizations in over 55 cities on 6 continents. I know for a fact that in the last couple of weeks, he keynoted in Barcelona, in Brazil, at ANFA, and in a couple of weeks, he'll be in Singapore. In his first best-selling book published by the University of Toronto Press, titled Constructing Health, How the Built Environment Enhances Your Mind's Health, Tye explores the relationship between placemaking, mind health, and human performance at the intersection of neuroscience and architecture. Welcome, Tye Farrow.
How nice to see you, Mike, and spend some time together. I think the last time we were together in person was in Washington at the John Hopkins Intentional Space
Yep.
session, which was amazing to have a little bit of time together.
Yep, it was.
And nice to see everybody else.
So Ty, the way we're going to work this today is that I'm going to ask Ty just a couple of questions to open up, and then I'm going to give him the mic to talk at more length about the subject matter from Constructing Health, his book. So Ty, in your book, you talk about how the immediate environment, what our designers create, feeds our minds and bodies. And I just like that thought process. I like that angle. Let's start by having you frame that just a little bit better for us, would you please?
Certainly, we uh, sometimes we don't really think really deeply about how our surroundings affect us, our biology and physiology. And sometimes we think our bodies physically are separated from our surroundings. And as you well know, we're now really beginning to realize how the places around us shape our thoughts, our memories, our emotions, and in fact, how they change our biology and our physiology. And this emerging research is really upending all of the assumptions we've had in the past, really where the body ends and the world begins. And really the research is showing that cognitively our bodies and our surroundings are in fact one. And there's a stat that I came upon um, that really excites me that really confirms that idea that our bodies are like huge radar dishes that, every second we're absorbing 11 million bits per second of sensory information, but only about 50 bits of that information is conscious. But it doesn't mean the other millions and millions of streams of information isn't registered with us. It's registered through us through all of our senses, sound, those funny feelings we have in our stomach. That's your body collecting information. Those butterflies is really your body beginning to tell you that you should do something. And I think the other thing that really excites me is this idea. There's a neuroscientist we're working at the Reichman University, Amir Ahmedi, and he's really focused on the bi-directional effect of multisensory perception. What does that mean? It means that we get information from our body that's telling our mind to do something, like those butterflies, or our mind telling our bodies we should do something. What's an example of that? Well, if I come up to you and I prick you with a pin in your leg, you're going to jump, and your body is telling your mind you should do something, run for your life, and get away from this thing. But if you're out to dinner with a good friend, you're eating a great meal, you're listening to some fantastic music at a concert, you're immersed in a movie or something, that sore arm of yours that was bugging you begins to wash away because all of this multi-sensory information is telling you that you feel good. And so this idea of the importance of understanding how we can use these multi-sensory stimulations to create the conditions of which we can thrive and prosper. And so really the book, Constructing Health, begins to explore this a little deeper, and looking at the science, really at the intersection of neuroscience and architecture. And it explores the science of the mind, which is really cognitive psychology, and it also explores the science of the brain, which is neuroscience. So really putting a little bit of an emphasis on the difference between the mind and the brain. One is an organ, and one can be seen a little bit as the hard, uh, the hardware, and the other the operating system. That's a big simplification, but
Mhm.
it's important to talk about. But really, what I'm interested in is how do spaces and environments make us feel? But more importantly, how do they make us feel better? And this idea of exploring how our mind and its various sensory systems interact with our surroundings to either enhance or harm our health and well-being. Meaning that while the biological brain, is physically housed in our skull, the recent research, as you well know, reveals that the mind, again, sort of like the operating system, our mind extends beyond the confines of our skull and extends to our surroundings. And it really raises some interesting questions around placemaking and what it does to our ability to cause health. And so as you're doing, and what I'm trying to do in the book is to bridge that gap between the knowledge in the therapeutic medical world, the science arena, as you rightly say, and in fact the design community, and really trying to reveal how we can intentionally shape our environments to support our physical and our neurological health, and really to get us to start asking some questions. For example, what causes health? What creates the conditions of which we can flourish? What if our health and well-being was the basis of judging every interior, every building, and every public space we occupy? And more so, what if we stop tolerating designs that cause boredom and dis-ease? And I'm doing that with an exclamation mark between the two. And environments that cause depression. We certainly saw a lot of that coming out of COVID. But back to this idea, how do our buildings make us feel, and how can they make us feel better? And that, our attitudes over time, over about the last 150 years or so, they've changed. Like in the past, historically, we had a real holistic and salutogenic view of the world that really focused on the origins and the causes of mind health. And I'm using mind health instead of mental health because it's an asset-based view of our mind, how they can cause physical health and societal health simply as a result of the choices we make. And interior design and architecture had really followed this, but the last 100 and so odd years, we have a really pathogenic view, stopping bad things from happening, as opposed to a salutogenic view of really accentuating health and well-being. And this emerging area of the intersection of neuroscience and architecture, the cognitive sciences, the social sciences, perceptual sciences with design and architecture, it's a fairly recent phenomenon. AFNA, the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture, it's only about 20 years or so ago. But there has been a lot of extraordinary research over the last 50 years that has really looked at how environmental sciences affect human behavior. And in my book and the research, there was two things that popped up that made a real change in my thinking, and they have to do with whales and mice. And so stick with me. That might be a little hard to connect the dots on what whales and mice have to do with environments. But let's start with whales. This statistic that came out of the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University is that we spend more time indoors than most whales spend underwater. Like, isn't that a remarkable statistic? Whales are outside above water, more than we go outside. And what does that really matter to us? It's really the fact that, we're very much aware and cognitively aware of all the microplastics that are being put into the oceans and what the damage is that they're doing to mammal life or marine life. And we also know that all the chemicals and the pollutions they're putting in oceans, we can clearly visualize and understand the damage that that's doing to the whales and and other fish and other things that are swimming around. We firmly understand that, but do we also connect the dots to the surroundings that each of us are sitting in right now, that are damaging our physiology and biology, the same as the little whales, or in fact feeding and nourishing us, the same way that the whales in a good and a pure ocean do to support everything they do in their daily lives from a physiology, a psychology, and a biological standpoint. Our environments are exactly the same. Okay, how do we get into mice and connect the dots to that also? Some really interesting research for me around the concept of environmental enrichment, originally started by a guy called Donald Hebe, in fact, a Canadian scientist in the 1940s. He was a scientist that had, little white mice in shiny cages in his lab that he was studying under bright lights. And what he did is he took some of these mice home and he put them in what he deemed an enriched environment, meaning they could run around, they could socialize with each other, they had physical challenges, they had cognitive challenges. And after a fairly short period, he realized that the mice in the enriched environments were healthier, performed better on tests, they lived longer, and in fact, they were socially, more better off than the mice that were in the shiny cages and in the bright lights. This research goes a little further. A really interesting lady for me, Diamond at the University of California, Berkeley, actually, which I'll be lecturing at in the near future. But in the 1960s, she takes this research further and really does it with rigor. She has a group of mice that she puts in the shiny lab cages with the bright lights 24 hours a day. She puts some mice in a regular, cage with a running wheel, for example, and she puts some in an enriched environment where they can run around a little more. And what she does is she dissects the brains after 30 days. So she dissects the brains only after 30 days. These mice have been in the environments for only a month. What does she discover? The mice that are in the enriched environments, the synapses, as you know, that are important connections between the neurons. After 30 days, the mice in the enriched environment, they grow the synapses at a rate of like 20 or 25%. And in fact, the cortex, which is the top of the brain, it begins to thicken also. This is just because the environment after the span of a month. What
Right.
happens to the mice in the regular cage? There's no change to the synapses or the cortex. And in fact, the mice that are in the impoverished environment, the synapses begin to wilt the same way that a plant does without light or sunlight. This idea that our environment fundamentally changes our physiology depending on the environment is extraordinary. This goes into another study. The question is it the same with people? There's a very famous case called the Angola three men that are in the Angola penitentiary in the deep south of the United States, one in solitary confinement for 10 years, another for 15. Roger King is in solitary confinement, a room without a window for 23 hours a day for just shy of 30 years. This goes to the Supreme Court to show that, in fact, this treatment is cruel and unusual punishment. And in fact, they have to show that it damages and changes your physiology. And what do they discover? In fact, that being in that environment, it damages your hippocampus, which is tied to memory, spatial orientation, on and on and on. And they were successful. All of this means to me one thing, which is we need to find a new path forward.
Hmm.
We need to find a path forward fundamentally where we see placemaking as a health generating system that is an accelerant for our biological, our physiological, and our psychological health and well-being. And we need to start viewing interior design, architecture, and placemaking. We need to view it not by what it is, not by what it is, but what it does. And what it does is it has the ability to cause health. It has the ability to be seen as a non-invasive therapeutic treatment simply by the way we decide to choose what and how we design the environments around us.
Think about for all of us listening, think about what that really means for our industry. There's another specialist and real world-renowned expert in this, Susan Magsamen out of the Johns Hopkins University, who says
I
the
saw her two
future
weeks
of
ago.
design is in creating spaces that heal. So, we have two specialists in this subject, real academics and scholars talking about this, and it's powerful for our industry. Tye, you've mentioned this word a couple times. One of the things that we're finding in interior design is that we're starting to grow our vocabulary. Words like biophilia and neuroaesthetics weren't around in our industry 7 or 8 years ago. And now in the upcoming market, we have more than a couple special events around neuroaesthetics and biophilia. You have been mentioning the word salutogenic design. If you could share a little bit more on that and help us get more comfortable with what that means, that'd be great.
Absolutely, and just 2 points to your earlier comment, about biophilia. Bill Browning,
Hmm.
I know, and I think he's brilliant. His document, 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design, I think is required reading. He's an extraordinary guy, and he's got all the data that supports. In fact, he also looks at the economics of biophilia.
Yeah, he was
I'm
our Ty. He was our keynote at our April market.
He's amazing.
He's
Like
brilliant.
we were just together in Europe, and I think he's extraordinary. Um, and as I said, I just before jumping on this call, I finished a 3 hour lecture on methods at the University of Toronto. I've just enrolled. I'm doing a PhD in public health and how we research quantitative, qualitative. And our biases are a big emphasis. I like to talk about the idea of space as a non-invasive therapeutic treatment. We need to get stuck into really looking at the healing aspects. I believe in it, but we need to really emphasize the research aspect of it. Salutogenesis, that isn't a word that particularly rolls off your tongue with great ease. And so salutogenesis. And so salutogenesis, let me step back. Who knows the word pathogens? I think it's a common word. We know that it comes from the Latin and the Greek words of patho and genesis, meaning disease, and the origins. Salutogenesis is a newer word that comes from the roots of the word solace, which ties back to the god of health and well-being. So solace, health, and genesis meaning the origins. And it was developed by an Israeli-American medical sociologist called Aaron Antonovsky. Um, and let me just frame that a little bit. I want to ask you a question. This stat that I came across, there's 8,000 known causes or symptoms of disease that have been discovered by contemporary researchers, but there's only 80 known causes or symptoms of health. Why is that?
Hmm.
The reason is that we find what we look for. We are very much in a pathogenic view. We view when we talk about health, we often think about health care, but health care and health and wellness are very, very different things. Salutogenesis at its core is about what makes people healthy. And as I mentioned, I'm talking about mind health as opposed to mental health. Mind health is seen as an asset-based view. Mental health, thankfully, mental health is coming out of the closets and we're beginning to address it in society. But it's mostly looked at stopping bad things from happening. The central concept of salutogenesis is this shift away from a deficit-based view to an asset-based view of health. And so Antonovsky laid out this concept only in the 1979 in a book called Health, Stress, and Coping. If you can get your hands on it, it's fantastic. About 50 years ago, and what he unravels in his words, one of the greatest mysteries in the study of people. How do we manage to stay healthy? And I'll put the emphasis on thrive and flourish. And so it's really focused on the origins of human health and well-being as opposed to disease. And he reframes health as a positive force of health generating practice. And that practice certainly relates to the way we choose to create our environments. And his main thing is about how we build resources. And there is a guy called Alan Delaney, who's a friend based in Sweden. He runs the Academy of Design for Health. They've got a conference coming up in Singapore. He translated into interior and architecture. So what Antonovsky, in a later book in 1987 called Unraveling the Mysteries of Health, he established an idea of a sense of coherence. What's a sense of coherence? Sense of coherence is a belief that you've got a feeling of confidence in your own internal thinking, your mind, and in fact, your external world, that things are predictable and there's a good chance that things are going to work out well. So if you don't have a good sense of coherence, you're probably not going to jump out of bed in the morning. And it's shaped by all of our life's experiences around us, and it's certainly shaped by our physical environments. We know some environments where we feel very comfortable and settled and pleased, which strengthens. So that's your external sense of coherence, and that supports your internal understanding around that. But it's also things that help us in our daily existence. And what he also talked about was that a sense of coherence is buttressed or supported by three things. And these are very, very important. They are comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. What does that mean? Comprehensibility refers to the perception of things around you that are understandable. And if you translate that into a building, comprehensibility, if you say you're walking up to a building, a lot of the buildings you walk up to, and it's like, where's the front door? How do I get into the
Mm-hmm.
building? And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't communicate to you. That's not comprehensibility. What about manageability? Manageability relates to sort of a behavioral dimension that you feel like you have, and you can understand the challenges and the things around you. So say you eventually get into the building, a manageability is, some buildings, they have the blue line and the red line and the yellow line painted on the floor to get you to where you're going. It's not supporting your manageability, your sense of ease of moving through the space. And the last one is really, really important, which is this idea of meaningfulness. And that is a motivational dimension. And that's internal, meaning that do you have meaning and purpose in your life? Do you have to get home and, get your dog out for your walk? You have to look over after some older parents or maybe children. That's meaning and purpose in your life. Or maybe you're involved in I don't know, a Rotary Club or something in your community. But meaningfulness also, as you well know, relates to the environments we create. What's an example? A simple one is you walk into a cathedral and your eyes are drawn upwards and there's purpose and that motivational dimension in your life. And so this idea that using salutogenesis as a frame is the environments we creating, does it give you a sense of coherence? Does it help you along the way? Is it comprehensible? The places we create, are they manageable? Do they help us in what we do? And equally, do they have meaning? Are they meaningfulness? And I think it's an overarching theory that I've laid out in our work that in fact you can plug a number of things in underneath it. One, a very important thing to look at for me is Snyder's hope theory. Hope is very different than optimism. This ties back to meaningfulness. And in fact, it relates very much to comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. I'll leave that for you to look up a little further. You might have heard about the idea of affordances, Gibson's affordances. How do things help you in your daily life? What's an example of one that doesn't? You know, when you walk up to a building and you grab the handle of the door to pull it open, um, and in small letters it says push on it. That handle isn't communicating to you how to use it. If it's a push plate, you know how to do it. We know on Antonio Gaudi, in some of his houses in Barcelona, that he made the handle. He had a piece of wax and he sculpted the handle around your hand. That's communicating how you use it. And the other piece is important is signifiers. Same idea, that's really beginning to communicate to you what you should do with it. One other concept I'd like to throw out there is shiitake. It's a Japanese term, shiitake. Look it up. It's a term that relates to things that nudge you to do the right thing. And I think that's very important design solutions. What's an example of that? Have you seen that photo of the staircase that's beside an escalator, and the staircase is painted to look like a piano, and black and white piano keys, and actually when you step on the keys it makes the sound of the piano. What you want to do is you want to run up that staircase because it's fun. So that design solution is encouraging to you to do a good thing. All of these tie back to the idea of salutogenesis. And I'm just going to throw out there quickly stress recovery theory, Roger Ulrich, important concept to look up. Attention restoration theory, developed by Kaplan and Kaplan, Rachel and Stephen, really looking how environments ties back to biophilia, how they can be very restorative to mental fatigue. And then the other one, voluntary and involuntary attention. In fact, it ties back to the fractal theory and the mid-range fractal concepts. I think all of those and Richard Taylor's work on mid-range fractal patterns from the University of Oregon. I think
I
all of
Richard
those
Richard was
pieces.
our guest on our webinar just last month.
He's
So
brilliant. Did he
he's
talk
brilliant.
about the
Absolutely.
yeah, the paintings and
Yeah.
um, the drip paintings? I forget what they called. I'm a big fan. He taught
Jackson
us in
Pollock.
my Jackson Pollock paintings. Why are people throwing all tens of million dollars at Jackson Pollock paintings? Because they're at that perfect perception as is in nature. So extraordinary work. With my doctoral studies, I'm moving into this thing called the architectural determinants of health. And in fact, architectural is being used as a catchphrase for interior design, buildings, infrastructure, but it's really focused on what are the salutogenic determinants of our health and well-being as a parallel to environmental determinants of health, social determinants of health, and economic determinants, really trying to put the exclamation mark that now that we are in the Anthropocene period where everything that mankind does is changing our planet, that we need to connect firmly salutogenic patterns of placemaking to health creation, not the pathogenic problems that a lot of the social and environmental determinants talk of, but really the very positive health creation aspects that our surroundings can do to our health and well-being. Maybe that's enough on salutogenesis
No.
for everybody.
Well, I also noted in your book, which I have right in front of me right now, that you also quote several other architects, like Sarah Robinson talking about we cannot touch without being touched in return. And I just think those are powerful word pictures that you might want to expand on and talk a little bit about what some of the other architects are also acknowledging out in the marketplace.
Yeah, Sarah, I think her in the back of my book, I've got 50 books to read that I suggest, and she's probably one or probably two or three, maybe. I think she is a great.
Just 50, Ty?
Yeah, I took it out of about 100 or so, and it's sort of it's condensing them down to try and deepen our knowledge in
Hmm.
sort of the neuroscience and the architecture side. Another lady who's very important to me, she's got a couple short books that you can get off Amazon. Her name is Lisa Barrett, actually a Canadian by birth, and now she's working in the States. She's got a very interesting lab, and she's researching something called the constructed theory of emotion. What does
Mm.
that mean? It's very important for my thinking in that what she effectively says that there's an outside world and there's an inside world, meaning that there's our surroundings that we inhabit, and then there is our mind within. And she says that there's inputs, and the inputs are everything through all of our senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. Two others. One is kinesthetics, not as well known a sense, but it's really our movement in space. And the other is our vestibular system, meaning that we're standing on a balcony looking down at a lobby. It's different perception than if we're down below. So she said there's inputs that go from the external world into our internal world, our mind, and then there's outputs, predictions, meaning because of that stimulation, what should we do with it? But the most important thing she says is that all of these things are shaped by things we have learned, things we've been taught, and things we've experienced, past experience or cultural overlays. You might call these things biased if I take something from my lesson this morning, is that your perception of an experience and mine can be very different. What does that mean? What's an example of that? Well, let's say if we're looking at a classical building with columns and arches, and maybe it looks like a courthouse or a city hall, like a classical building. Well, to you and me, that might symbolize order and good government, that we've experienced around us. But if you take that same building and it was a picture of the Parliament buildings in Cape Town, and you're a young black man or woman, that same building might symbolize oppression. What's another example? Think of if I said to you, we should paint your entire, living room, a very strong red. You might think that's, a bit extreme. But if you take that to, say, a Chinese example, it would be something that would be terrific. So our perceptions are very, very different. And so if you look the same way that our environments, our built environments have inputs, they come into our perception and they have outputs, and we can tie those to the way that we build positive relationships, meaningful person-to-person relationships, which I talk a lot about in my book. It comes out of Barrett's work. And this idea that the way that our mind builds meaningful person-to-person relationships is very, very similar to the way our mind builds person-to-place relationships. What's an example of a meaningful person-to-person relationship? Think of generosity. generosity, say there's a mentor that's helped you along in your career. They've helped you without you asking. They've just done it. What's an example in say a building? I can think of, say, you're walking down the street, maybe in where I live in Toronto, and having a canopy outside. So if it's raining, that's a generous gift that somebody's, a designer has given us to keep me dry in the rain. And obviously, not having the canopy isn't particularly generous. Equally, if I'm in, say, the middle of Africa, maybe a tree or a line of trees and a bench to sit in, that would be very generous. The important thing, generosity, variety, and vitality, things that are natural, authentic, solid and silent and still. So there's from the very excited through to very silent and still. Those characteristics that come out of person to person relationships can be translated equally into to person to place relationships. And what I would give everybody as a takeaway is if you would describe the room that you're sitting in now as a person, what would be the qualities and characteristics? Would it be
Hmm.
natural? Would it be
Hmm.
uptight? You can picture somebody with the top undone up tight, in a dark tie. You can translate those feelings
Hmm.
into people and people into places. The most important thing about these characters and qualities that we have to understand is one size doesn't fit all. Back to that example of the classical building and my perception and somebody in Cape Town. And so the idea of generosity can be interpreted very, very differently. Environments that are natural can be interpreted very, very different. Ones that are silent and still, or ones that offer variety and vitality, they're all different. And the example is they're not prescriptive. They're more like ingredients in food. What does that mean? Think of cinnamon. Cinnamon, to me, again, I think of maybe Christmas, a spiced wine, spiced coffee, or maybe a spiced goose, cinnamon in it. But if it's an Indian biryani in India, it's a very different cultural overlay, but that same sort of woody, semi-sweet flavor is exactly the same. And so I think the idea of thinking of these different aspects of putting these ingredients together like a recipe, they can be modulated in different ways, but the qualities and characteristics are very similar. And they're built out of Lisa Barrett's work. And another area I don't know if you've gone into, but this idea of place attachment theory that ties back to salutagenesis, and it also ties back to the constructed theory of emotion also.
We started this call by challenging everyone listening. Do we all realize just how important we are? And I think you've gotten into in just the first 40 minutes. I think you're getting a better handle on the importance of our role as a design industry in influencing the health and well-being of the clients that we serve. I have to say, you have to go get constructing health. The Tye is sharing with us so much of the wealth that is in constructing health. Please go get it and educate ourselves on this. There have been a couple of things that really stood out for me so far, and one phrase, interior design is a non-invasive therapeutic treatment. What a great way to think about who we are and what we do. Science considers our industry, folks, as an alternative health resource. And we need to own that. We need to let that, sink in and begin to conduct and act that way and have the confidence to lean on that. This is what I hear from designers that they're learning that from Tye and from others that they're being validated. So many of us have always known that we make people feel better. But now the science is there to document the fact that we are an alternative health resource. Um, the couple of other things. I love, Tye, your reference to the radar dish. the word picture is just great, that we're taking in millions of bits of information and internalizing them and acting on them. And the other part I really like, I talk about when I do presentations, is the extended mind concept from the Clark and Chalmers paper in the late
Absolutely.
90s.
One,
So
I want to give you one more a
go ahead.
little visual image to take away, and it's one of my favorite. It's sort of like some of these talks. I start, I put up a picture of a whale, and everybody sort of scratches their head, and I say, "Hold on, this isn't a marine biology talk. You didn't come to the wrong room." But one of my most favorite is I put up a picture of like a McDonald's hamburger on a white background. And I asked the question, okay, what do you see? And everybody says, well, Ty, it's a hamburger. And I said, well, in fact, for me, it's a metaphor for a lot of the places and spaces that we create. It's transactional space, and what do I mean by that? Like a lot of the environments we're asked for them to be functional, aren't we? Well, it's got to be functional. The space has to be functional. Well, of course, it has to be functional. Well, is a hamburger functional? Absolutely. You can pick it up in your hands. You can eat it. You don't need a knife and a fork and a plate. It's doing exactly what it's asked to do. It gives you a little bit of protein, maybe some calories. But what the hamburger does is it damages your body and your physiology and your biology because of the ultra processed nature of what's in it. The
Hmm.
massive amounts of sodium are, in fact, damaging your body. But isn't that the same as a lot of the environments we create? It has to be functional. Uh,
Hmm.
the hamburger, you consume it, and then after an hour, you feel empty. But isn't that a lot of our spaces leaving us feeling empty and they're damaging it? Because a lot of the environments are, in fact, ultra processed environments. They're not nourishing and feeding us. Think of the smoothies we have in the morning that have blueberries and pomegranates and bananas and all kinds of things that are feeding and nourishing all aspects of our bodies and our physiology. Our environments are doing exactly the same thing as food, and so we need to think of interior design and placemaking and architecture as food. They feed us, they enrich our
Great.
mind, our bodies, and getting to talk about with our clients, how do we create the conditions of which we thrive and flourish? And one an example that's from a school environment, a study that I find extraordinary, that student 2,000 classrooms, 20,000 students that are studied, looking at a good quality of daylight as opposed to glare in the environment, and how the students perform on tests. The students with good daylight perform 25% better on English or reading and 20% better on mathematics. If I came to you and said I can increase the performance of your team because of the design solution by 25%, is that a value? But say I'm wrong. Say it's only 15 or 10%. The problem is that most environments, there's presenteeism, and the environments are sucking the life out of us, and we're performing at 60 or 65 or 70% compared to 110. And one thing I would leave you with, Mike, also, and your team, as you're getting into that other thing about marketing and communicating to your client. Here's a little statistic that is very important to me. If you spend $1 nominally on the building or the environment you're creating, what are the costs of the operating costs over time? So you spend $1 on the building, the capital cost. What's the operating cost? Is it $2, $3, or $5? It's $5, meaning that every penny out of that dollar on the capital cost that reduces mechanical or electrical or systems, one penny of that influences the $5, that's very, very important. But what's the cost of the people, the salaries, and everything within the building compared to the $1 in capital, the $5 in the operating cost? Is it $10, 20, 50, 100? it's $200. So if any penny of that dollar that you're spending on the capital cost has an impact on human performance, it is massive to any organization or anybody that's using the building. Space as a non-invasive therapeutic treatment. And if there's only one thing that people remember out of this lecture or talk, if there's only one thing you remember, it is this: there is no such thing as neutral space. There is no space that sits in the middle that doesn't enhance your health, salutogenic, or do the exact opposite. The problem is that most of the environments we know are the ones that suck the life out of us. Why don't we want to go back to the office? Because everybody hates the office because it's soul sucking. Why do we want to stay at home? Because it's personalized, there's daylight, it's flexible. We need to remember the one thing: there's no such thing as neutral space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to steal another one of Ty's lines, and I think you're all beginning to realize now why he says design is the next frontier for public health. And
Well, and
again, I just want to repeat that we all in our industry need to see the future of our industry and the enhanced value proposition that our industry will have and enjoy when we engage with this type of thought process. Ty, I
and
want to thank you, but I
I
also,
just want to emphasize something
yeah.
on that. The reason I'm doing a degree in public health is, I believe, I'm not a designer or an architect. I'm a public health professional, and I just want to leave you with one thought on that is, we all know Central Park, and Central Park in New York City was designed by the landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. But the thing that I discovered in my research is Frederick Law Olmsted wasn't a landscape architect. He wasn't a landscape architect. His two kids were, and they set up the landscape design program at Harvard. Frederick Law Olmsted was the founder of what became the American Red Cross. He was a public health official that use design
Mhm.
to enhance mind, body, social, economic health as a result of design. So we need to think of ourselves as public health workers as opposed to designers or architects.
Well, that's great. Wow. Hey, everybody, we're just about running out of time. Does anybody have any questions that you want to put into the chat, and we'll try and answer some questions? Any thoughts at all? Patricia Morrison says soulless spaces leave us with a feeling of emptiness. Spaces designed with intention open the door to connection and resonance. Nice.
Right on.
Erica says amazing talk. That's Erica McLean, I think, out of Dallas. Okay, this has been a fascinating session. How do you, hold on, trying to observe so much gold. How do you measure the health of your interiors? From Gabrielle in Toronto.
There's a variety of um, there are certainly a number of simple wearables that aren't expensive right now. They can measure heart rate variability.
Hmm.
Heart rate gets excited if it's stress or not stress. If you're falling in love or you're under total stress, your heart rate will go up. Heart rate variability is a measurement. You may see it on the Aura rings or other things that measures regeneration. There's simple things to look at: skin conductance. Those are some of the measurable, but those are quantitative research. You can look at qualitative research by beginning to ask people, a variety of questions in certain rooms that make them feel better. And qualitative research is very important also. So I think I would encourage you to really engage with people that are using, if you think of people that in their home, they like one room or they don't like the other room, begin to ask, okay, what is it? Is it around the lighting? Is it around natural light? Is it around material? Is it around form or shape? And get them to be very analytic from one space to the other. And that will help you measure, again, how environments make you feel and how they make you feel better. How big the room is, how tall the ceiling is, or how low. Qualitative research is very important also.
Deanna out of Grand Haven, Michigan says, I think post-occupant research is also important.
Yeah, and um, I think, one a book, in fact, I have here, Kirk Hamilton, who's a friend, I think he's brilliant.
Mm.
Do you know this book?
Uh, no, but I'm going to get it.
Evidence-Based Design for Multiple Building Types, written by Kirk Hamilton. He's out of Texas A&M University. It's probably the first really solid base on how you can undertake evidence-based design as a designer, as an architect. We know evidence-based medicine, evidence-based design. It really helps you that you can do it on. All of us can do it on an interior, on a living room, on a building, on a city, but it really helps you give you the tools to be a bit more intentional.
Ty, one last question from Eric Aschauer. She says, I'm interested to hear how you see the work of neuroarchitecture being valued by clients, users, etc. So there is a demand for salutogenic design?
The curious thing is I don't talk a lot about neuroscience and architecture or neuroaesthetics. Sometimes it becomes a little more complicated for people to understand. Sometimes if you throw in neuroscience, everybody thinks, oh, I don't know, how am I
Yeah,
going to walk into
yeah.
that discussion? What I talk about a lot is how can we create the conditions of which we can thrive and prosper. And the salutogenesis, I don't use that word a lot because it's hard, but
Hmm.
when you talk about um, how do some spaces, how are they comprehensible, manageable, and offer meaning? And those words are easier for people to walk into. Um, and then as you get further into it, you can start talking about how daylight enhances performance, how materiality lowers your blood pressure, certain materials, your heart rate, um, and a variety of other biological markers. But use a language that's very accessible. My book, for example, it's written in a one of the greatest reviews that really struck with me is it's not pretentious in its
Right.
language. It's very accessible.
Hmm.
And you can borrow some of the language from there. You need to be able to create the conditions where it's very easy for people to walk in and have a discussion on this. Sometimes the neuroscience, you think, well, if there are no neuroscientists, I can't walk into that discussion.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
language is very important.
Ty, there's a request. Please show the book again so that they can get a take a another extra couple of seconds to yes, evidence-based design by Kirk Hamilton. All right, good. Thank you, Ty. And
It's a great
listen,
read.
on behalf of all of the audience, this has been a gem, Ty. I mean, I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts when you were over in Europe, and it's just such a pleasure to have you share the. Oh, we have one last question. When will you be speaking at UC Berkeley?
January, I don't have it in front of me. There's a, actually, they have it online. I've got it here. So they've got a continuing studies winter program. It's online. So, um, sorry, this one's Stanford. Uh, Stanford University, they've got a course called Brains, Bodies, and Buildings, Neuroarchitecture and Spaces That Shape Us, um, beginning in November. But look up Stanford University, Brains, Bodies, and Buildings.
Okay.
Um, and that's Stanford. I don't have the Berkeley one in front of me.
Well, again, Tye, thank
If
you
you go onto
so.
our website, there's lots of info on our website. Or if you go to follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram, both under Tye Farrow, and we try and keep them very information rich so that you can get resources to help you.
I've had a couple of questions from people. Yes, this is being recorded and it'll be on my website, scienceanddesign.com, in another day or two. And to Tye, a heartfelt thank you for everything today. We really appreciate it. A reminder to everyone listening, on October 24th, we have When Design Heals, and we'll be making a special announcement about a brand new design competition developed by Go Natural Living. It's called the High Point Project. We'll be talking about casting calls and we'll be introducing the judges. And all attendees will get an inside track to meeting with the executive producer, excuse me, of the TV show. Tye, thank you, and thank you to everyone. What a great hour. Be well, everybody.
Thanks for including me.
My pleasure, Tye. Thank you.
All the best.
All right.